It was just after midnight when the massive oak doors of Stanford Memorial Church echoed shut. The sandstone courtyard behind her was silent, the long colonnades empty. Only a few lights glowed across the sprawling campus, casting pale halos against the stone. Arlis Perry, just 20 years old, walked down the nave toward the altar. She wasn't looking for company or noise or even distraction. She came to pray. The cavernous sanctuary held nothing but her footsteps and the quiet rustle of her skirt as she slipped into a pew. She was young, devout, newly married, and far from home. By dawn, she would be dead, her body arranged in a way so disturbing that whispers of ritual murder would swirl for decades. Arlis was from Bismarck, North Dakota, raised in the center of America with Midwestern values, deep faith, and quiet determination. Her friends remembered her as steady, kind, and deeply religious. She married Bruce Perry, her high school sweetheart, and followed him to California when he entered Stanford as a pre-med student. To Arlis, life on the sprawling campus was overwhelming, but she clung to her routines and her religion. Prayer was her constant, the way she found comfort in a world that felt so much larger and darker than the prairie towns she had known. On the evening of October 12, 1974, the Perrys had argued. It was nothing dramatic, just the kind of sharp exchange that happens in any marriage. Bruce wanted to stay home. Arlis insisted she needed time alone. She told him she was going to pray at the church. He stayed behind in their apartment. It was the last time he would ever see her alive. Around 11:30 p.m., Arlis entered the grand church. Security guard Stephen Crawford noted her arrival. It wasn't unusual. Students often slipped inside for late-night prayers. The doors were typically open, the church seen as one of the safest spaces on campus. Crawford moved on with his rounds. When he returned in the early hours, something struck him as odd. The doors were locked from the inside. No one ever locked Memorial Church that way. He used his keys, stepped into the stillness, and walked down the long aisle. His flashlight beam cut through the dark. The silence felt heavy, wrong, and then he saw her. Arlis Perry lay at the altar. Her body was posed in a way that investigators would struggle to describe without unease. She was flat on her back, her blouse torn open, a long church candle forced into her body. Another candle rested against her chest, wedged between her breasts. Her hands had been folded neatly, almost reverently, across her chest as if in prayer, but her face was contorted in death. She had been strangled. The brutality of the assault combined with the deliberate staging made it one of the most haunting crime scenes ever documented on a college campus. Police rushed to the church, horrified by what they found. Even seasoned investigators were shaken. A murder inside a church was shocking enough, but the deliberate posing, candles, altar, mockery of worship, suggested something darker than a simple assault. Word spread quickly. Soon the whispers started. Satanism, ritual killing, secret cults. In the 1970s, fears of occult groups and ritualistic murders were rising in America. The staging of Arlis Perry's body seemed to fit every nightmare parents had about the counterculture spilling across California. Bruce Perry was questioned first. Detectives pressed him about their argument that night. He explained that she had left around 11:30, that he had gone to sleep, and later reported her missing when she didn't return. His alibi checked out. His grief was real, his shock unmistakable. He was cleared. Attention turned to the guard, Stephen Crawford. After all, he had been the last person to see her alive and the first to find her dead. He insisted he was innocent, telling police he had simply stumbled upon the horror when unlocking the church. With no physical evidence linking him, detectives had little choice but to let him go. The case stalled. The murder gripped headlines. Reporters swarmed the campus, asking whether cults were operating in the shadows of Silicon Valley. Books about the so-called process church of the final judgment, linked Perry's killing to supposed satanic groups. Conspiracy theories flourished. Evangelists warned of dark forces in California. For years, Arlis's death was cited as evidence of ritual sacrifice, but behind the lurid rumors, the case file gathered dust. Detectives could not prove who killed her. For Arlis's family in North Dakota, the silence was unbearable. They buried their daughter and carried the weight of unanswered questions. How could a young woman who devoted her life to prayer meet such an end? Inside a church? Her story became a whispered warning among Stanford students, the bride who entered to pray and never came home. Decades passed. Crawford left security work and tried to disappear into obscurity, but investigators never fully let go. By the 2000s, DNA technology began cracking cases once thought impossible. Samples taken from Arlis Perry's body, degraded by time, were re-examined. In 2016, the breakthrough came. The DNA matched Stephen Crawford. The guard who claimed to have discovered the body had in fact been the killer all along. Police moved to arrest him in June 2018. They surrounded his apartment. As they prepared to enter, Crawford pulled out a revolver and shot himself. At 72 years old, after decades of hiding in plain sight, he ended his life before facing justice. For investigators, the suicide was confirmation. The evidence was overwhelming. For the Perry family, it was a bitter closure. They finally knew who had killed Arlis, but never why. The chance to hear the truth from the man himself died with him. The staging of the crime, the candles, the folded hands, was meant to shock, to confuse, to throw suspicion toward imagined cults and sinister forces. For decades, it worked. But the truth was simpler and darker. A predator in a position of trust attacked a young woman in her place of prayer, desecrating her faith and body. To this day, Stanford Memorial Church is a place of beauty and silence, its mosaics glittering in the California sun. Yet when students pass through at night, they sometimes remember. They remember the story told from one generation to the next, of a young bride who slipped into the sanctuary for prayer and never walked out again, of the evil that hid in plain sight, wearing the face of a guard, of the horror that defied explanation for 40 years. The case of Arlis Perry endures because it is more than murder. It is the violation of the sacred, a reminder that faith and safety can be shattered in the same breath. Her story is whispered like a curse, a haunting on a campus that prefers to forget. But memory has a way of lingering, and the name Arlis Perry will never truly leave the halls of Stanford. Thank you for listening to The Lantern's Tale. Subscribe for more true stories, if you dare.